Hello, I'm Guy Hollebon from Harrison Clark Rickabees. I'm a legal director here in the Employment and Immigration team, and I'm joined today by Chris Hopkirk, and we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness and well-being in the workplace. Chris, thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
So tell me a bit about you.
So, it's Chris Hopkirk. That's me. I'm the owner and MD of a company called the Business of Mindfulness. So we set this business up about 12 to 18 months ago, essentially, to bring mental health and well-being practices into the workplace. My history is very much sales and marketing led, been in the commercial sector, running a business, being a shareholder, knowing the strains and stresses of doing that yourself in terms of a leadership role, but also your employees and how they struggle with their own mental health and well-being. And that's essentially why my journey started and sort of diversified from where I was before.
Yeah. So you've seen it for yourself, as it were, and presumably seen benefits of having well-being initiatives in the workplace. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my own journey was a sales director with a lot of fear and anxiety and stress in a small company that was marginal and always charging around with a very leaky face, I was accused of, and quite demanding and reactive. And I sort of learned about mindfulness in its own right over a period of time, learned how it managed to improve my ability to respond rather than react, reduce my anxiety and stress. And then I realised that we had employees that struggled with similar sort of situations, not necessarily work-related, maybe stuff at home, mortgage rates, divorces, sort of high energy costs, those sort of things. We were having employees coming in not able to do their own, get their own support really. So we started to implement the strategy of well-being within the workplace, and it involved some mindfulness, of course, but then there are a lot of other initiatives that we were able to introduce, which brought well-being to the employees, but also a more productive and efficient company.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a common theme that we see with our clients, where particularly in smaller businesses, it can be a bit of a struggle each month, and the senior leaders are equally under pressure as much as staff are. And so if you can create an environment where it is more productive, staff feel happier coming to work, I mean, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And it has to start with the leadership team, and we as owners of companies, we sort of strive and struggle on and think that we're sort of impervious to the stresses of the world, but we do get affected by that. And obviously, if we can implement that, and if we can understand that ourselves, then we can then create a culture. I think that's the key thing, and it starts at the top. You create a well-being culture, then you start getting help for employees, and then you get a far more productive and happier workforce.
Yeah, and I'm interested, obviously mindfulness is one of the aspects of well-being, but in terms of mindfulness, what is it?
Well, mindfulness is the ability to stay present, to feel your emotions and your thoughts, but without being reactive. So if we can stay present, we're not going off into the future, catastrophizing, we're not going back in the past or ruminating. And it's learning to be non-judgmental about those emotions and being able to regulate them so that we're not going off into a different world and catastrophizing or ruminating.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I find with employees it is goal setting, because I think there's an element of people set targets very high.
Yeah.
And I think there's a danger then that you don't achieve them. And so you end up coming out feeling negative. So if you go into work thinking, well, today I'm going to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
And at 5 o'clock you haven't done that, you can be leaving work with a negative concept. And I think that if you can implement your sort of daily to-do list in a way that's a bit like building blocks and stepping stones, so that actually you can come out of work thinking, well, I have achieved something today. I may not have achieved all of those stretch targets that I wanted to try and get to, but I have actually got a decent number of ticks on my to-do list. I think that just helps people feel a bit more positive about what they've achieved in the course of that day or that week or that month or over whatever time frame.
It's a really good point. I think part of mindfulness, I mean, a lot of people accuse it of being a bit fluffy, let's say, but I'm a 63-year-old guy who's gone through it, and I know exactly what it's about, and I don't see it in that respect, but learning to be kind to yourself is one of the key strands of mindfulness. So I guess what you're saying is, if you're kind to yourself and you manage your workload in a rational way and not trying to overdo it all the time, and you become more efficient anyway. And if you do it that way, I think, and in a kind way to yourself, and mindfulness encompasses a lot of techniques. One of them is kindness to yourself, and practicing that. So I think that it makes a valid point, and I agree with you completely.
And in terms of the work that you're doing now, you're working with organisations and looking at implementing wellbeing strategies. Presumably you end up with sort of two camps of organisations that you're approaching. You might have some that are, as it were, the enlightened ones, that the door is already open to an extent in terms of what you're wanting to talk to them about. But there'll be others where perhaps the door is firmly shut and you've got to try and prise it open and get a foot through the door. In relation to that second category, how do you go about selling wellbeing initiatives?
Yeah, good thing I'm a salesman, isn't it, Guy? I try not to sell too much now, but I think it's communicating what we do. And clearly we have to reach companies and company owners. They're the people that really make the decision. If I can get through certain elements like HR managers or managers as such, they're the ones that get affected most, and they're the ones that I think we have to help take that step to go to the owner and say, look, there's this opportunity here. We really need to be aware of it. Now, we can start with a whole strategy, and maybe that's too much. Maybe we start with a very small sort of plan of action of why don't we do a sort of an insights report we would call to survey the employees and see what their feeling is. Sometimes employers get a little bit scared of what that is going to be like, but I think the brave ones and the ones that want to change will do that and be able to then set up an effective plan for themselves.
Because essentially you need a baseline to start from, don't you? So you need to understand what's there at the moment.
100%.
And then you can look at what needs doing going forward. And what about the benefits to an organisation?
Oh, the benefits can be enormous, really. Obviously, apart from the fact that you're going to get well-balanced, resilient employees, your absenteeism rates will reduce, your retention rates will improve, recruitment costs will come down. And just one example, recruitment costs at the moment, the average cost to recruit someone is over £8,000. So, we don't always see the benefit from a financial point of view. And that, because I come from a commercial background, I can present that to employers so they get a better understanding of, yes, there is a return on investment here, and ultimately improved productivity will improve profits. It may be a harsh, dirty word, let's say, when we're talking about well-being, but I think that in workplace, the two will go together.
But to an extent, if you think about a boardroom table, you're going to have an HR director around that table who will be looking at it from the benefits to the staff, to the culture of the organisation, recruitment, retention. But you're also going to have a finance director, an operations director, a managing director that may be looking far more at the P&L. And therefore, if you've got a business case that encompasses that, you're ticking boxes for everybody.
100%.
I mean, one of the things that we tend to find we see a lot of is businesses that are trying to manage sickness absence. And it is very difficult because having sickness absence impacts not only on that person that's off, so they're not productive, but it has an indirect effect on their colleagues, because suddenly colleagues are having to pick up more work to cover for that person. There might be a sense of grievance then amongst colleagues that they're working twice as hard and they're not getting remunerated accordingly. And so if an organisation can manage that sickness absence or reduce it, it absolutely increases productivity.
100%, yeah.
And I'm just interested in other benefits of it. I mean, you've talked about retention of staff, and I can understand that if the place of work is a far more enjoyable place, you've removed stresses, people like coming into work, they're going to stay with you. But what about recruitment? How do you find that this impacts upon ability to recruit?
Well, I think what you do is you end up having a reputation as a company where people actually want to come and work. And I think it's Indeed recently did a survey where I believe it's a very high percentage, and in the 90s of people looking for jobs are looking for companies that have a well-being strategy or a well-being sort of culture that they can go to. And I think certainly it improves the company's reputation.
I think these days, if you look at new entrants to the workforce, it's not just about how much their base salary is. They're looking at a much wider range of benefits, what that organisation will be able to provide. And I think Wellbeing is very much part of that they are attracted to. One of the things I think comes through from the way you're talking actually is this isn't simply a tick box exercise. It's not about having a policy that sits on a shelf gathering dust. It's very much about embedding this within the culture of the organisation. I think you probably agree entirely with that.
Yeah, and we as a business provide mental health first aid training. Now, it's a great initiative, but if all you do is have a mental health first aider in the business, I'm not sure that's going to help the culture in its own right. And a lot of companies forget to look after the mental health first aider. EAPs, employment assistance programs, very good initiatives, but they're no good if we just think that that's just going to solve the problem. A lot of employees don't even know where they are on the intranet. So if you don't have a culture that encourages that, you've got to have a mix of things, because everyone's not the same. Not everyone wants to pick up a phone to someone that they don't know. So I think for us, it's about creating the right culture, providing initiatives, but it's got to be sustainable. It's got to be ongoing.
I guess that sustainability essentially provides two elements of benefit here, that we're talking about something which can help reduce an existing problem that you've got, but equally it can also act as a prevention going forward. So if you can get that culture embedded in an organisation, you haven't just addressed an immediate spike in sickness absence rate, you've actually made sure that you're preventing that going forward, and you sustain that into the future.
100%. I mean, the way that we sort of put forward our proposition is really there's awareness, which is your mental health first aid training. Prevention, we tend to see mindfulness as a more preventative tool, and the company is called the Business of Mindfulness, and we do a lot of aspects around well-being, but it's based on mindfulness, and that's our firm belief that if you can create some help and support and some idea and education within that, then it will help prevent any worse cases coming up and sort of reducing the stress. So you're right, prevention has got to be part of it, otherwise we're not going to move forward.
Yeah. And I can see from a legal perspective that there's an obvious compliance angle to this, that you've got measures that will help show health and safety compliance, etc., but also in terms of potentially reducing risk of employment tribunal claims, that if you end up as an employer faced with an employment tribunal claim and it relates to somebody saying, well, they were stressed at work or they were overworked, they hadn't been supported, if you can demonstrate not only that you've got the written policies and procedures, but actually that the organisation as a whole really embraces the idea of well-being, that's going to be a really big benefit to defending that claim.
100%, yeah. Yes, you're doing it for the employees, but you also got to make sure that you support yourself in what you're doing and you're doing the right thing. It's an interesting, we talk about health and safety as a separate issue a lot of the time, but if someone comes into work and they're working on machinery and they're mentally not able, that's a health and safety issue, and a lot of people don't always pick that up, and I think it's really worth sort of commenting on.
And so just on a practical level, if somebody wanted to implement a wellbeing initiative, part of that might involve the mindfulness aspect, how would you go about doing it?
Essentially, what we initially do is we do what's called a diagnostic, and we look at the existing provision, and then we would do an employee survey which would tell us a bit about what the company are doing. We're essentially analysing what is the company doing already, what is their provision, and then we would, from the basis of that, put together a strategy and an implementation plan that they could carry forward for the sort of 12-month period, and that's how we would look at it.
And that presumably involves partly working with the senior leadership team, but also working with staff across the organisation, particularly, I imagine, in terms of getting their understanding up of what support is available within the organisation, what the benefits to them are, because this is just about workplace benefit and productivity at work, this goes wider than, isn't it?
100%. And it's interesting, we're working with a company at the moment that has, we've done a sort of the insights report survey with the employees, and they have different departments. So it's interesting getting feedback from different departments. So you've got production, you've got finance, you've got sort of admin, sales. Every department has a different view of what's going on. And of course, the production might feel they've not got enough resource, or, sales might be overworked from a sales point of view. But I think that helps us get a real perspective of the overall business. And, you can get some good feedback and use that to build that strategy. And different areas might need different things. But you're right, starting at the top, senior leadership team, and then essentially what we're looking for is really to establish a well-being forum within a business, so that there is, responsibility for ensuring that once we're finished, they take it on.
Yeah. And I imagine that having seniority within that is important, because if you've got leaders that are flag bearers of this initiative, that's going to set the right tone, set the right culture.
Without question, without the leaders taking this on, it will not be sustainable. It will not be sustainable. I think I've seen that myself. And we talk about enlightened leaders, and then the not so enlightened leaders. The enlightened leaders are the easy ones, obviously. It's not so enlightened, or maybe it's not aware. So what you don't know, you don't know. That's that scenario. So there's a lot more in the public domain now about mental health and well-being in the workplace, and I think the statistics are not pretty. Let's put it that way.
I think the point you make is a very good one, though, because it's certainly a buzzword within HR environments, but I'm not sure that necessarily every organisation fully understands A, what it actually means, but B, what the benefits to that organisation are of implementing these strategies. That it isn't simply tick box, there are clear benefits as you've described. So I hope that'll be a really interesting point that people will take away from today.
No, I hope so too. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chris.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks.
If there's anything which we've just spoken about that you think is interesting, useful to your organisation, please do get in touch. We can help support you managing the process from a legal perspective, and we can put you in touch with people that can help in terms of the practical implementation, people just like Chris. So please do contact us.